Good afternoon, and welcome to the Wednesday afternoon conference call with Trusts Unlimited. This is Jim George speaking. I'm the non-attorney spokesman and facilitator for Trusts Unlimited. Before we begin, I'd like to apologize for the technical problem we had last week. For those that were on the call, for some reason I had an extreme amount of static on my end at least, and I couldn't even hear myself think, let alone try to conduct a conference call, so I had no choice but to abort that call. Fortunately, the information I had for last week was very similar to the information that I had for the previous week, so we didn't lose too much there. Some things have occurred over the last week, which I'll discuss here today. I'd like to welcome those of you calling in for the first time or those that will be listening to the replay over the next 24 to 48 hours. We have a standard format with this calls. We like to move quickly, bottom line the information for you. We know you're busy people. We like to spend a few minutes talking about the revaluation of the Iraqi dinar, which we continue to believe is the base currency for the reset of the other currencies. Spending a few minutes talking about the program we've put in place to assist you, and then go to a brief Q&A. So let's go ahead and get started and talk about the situation as it exists today in Iraq. First, by way of disclaimer, Trusts Unlimited is not the purveyor of the dinar and these other currencies. We're not advocating either the sale or purchase of these currencies, but as rather substantial currency holders ourselves, we're sharing with you the information that we think is relevant. The first relevant issue beginning this call would be an expectation for the revaluation of the Iraqi dinar. Best case scenario, based on our information, is the possibility within the next 60 days. Worst case scenario is that this would be pushed all the way to January of 2020. I know that's disappointing for a lot of people, particularly those that have put a lot of stock in the things that the gurus have been saying. But after a number of years of being told we're in a 5-day window, I hope you will take the things that the gurus say with a grain of salt. There are a lot of reasons why January 2020 is a distinct possibility, but again, there is also the possibility that the 2019 budget can be redone to reflect the stepped-up value of the dinar. But there are some things going on right now, irrespective of the situation with their budget, that are contributing to the delay. First and most importantly is the increased tensions between the United States and Iran. This is based primarily on Iranian threats against U.S. soldiers and other officials in country in Iraq. I was on the phone for over an hour with my godson, who did 2 tours in Iraq. He now heads up a security force in Iraq. He's in the green zone. He is currently living in the embassy, the American embassy in Baghdad. He basically informed me something I did not know. He said that the U.S. embassy in Baghdad is by far the largest and best fortified American embassy on the planet. So that seems to indicate that the United States is there for the duration until all of these issues are resolved. Another issue relating to the continued postponement of the revaluation of the dinar is the fact that the Parliament and Prime Minister Mahdi have still not come to terms with the confirmation of 4 of the ministerial seats in the cabinet. Now, there is a deadline for the formation of a new government by the end of June. So if the United States can resolve its issues with Iran, i.e. making Iran understand that they will pay dearly for attempting in any way to interject themselves in the reemergence of Iraq, or in interfering in any way with the national security interests of the United States, that will not go well for them. That, coupled with the possibility of the formation of the government at the end of June, is why I say there's a possibility for reinstatement within the next 60 days. Unfortunately, there's also continued corruption in the currency auctions, which of course is benefiting some of the corrupt officials that unfortunately still hold seats and enjoy immunity in Iraq. The silver thread in this lining, though, is that the Sadrist coalition, which is the largest coalition in Parliament, has basically thrown down the gauntlet and made certain demands which they say, if they are not met, that certain political officials will feel the heat, not only in terms of future elections, but in terms of the accountability and justice law. The demands are these: that they stop the currency auctions, which are clearly corrupt, that they complete the project of the deletion of the zeros. Now, that's a very complicated process. There is some contradictory information about how that will impact Iraqi nationals, but not how it will impact those of us that hold this currency. We're international investors. And last, they've demanded the reinstatement, i.e. the stepped-up value of the Iraqi dinar in country. And lastly, they want the United States troops to remain in country in Iraq until the Iranian Revolutionary Guard militia forces that are roaming around in the country have been permanently removed. So obviously there are things that still need to be resolved, but as I said, these are issues that could theoretically be resolved within the next 60 days. But if that is not in fact the case, then we're looking to January 2020. Again, I know that's disappointing, but for many of the people that I talk to that are clients of ours, they've had currency for 3, 5, even 10 years. Another 5 months isn't going to make that much of a difference. So it's a mixed bag, but at the end of the day, we are going to see the revaluation. It's just probably going to take longer than we had hoped. Now, for those of you that hold the dinar and other currencies and have not gotten your affairs in order or may not understand what needs to be done prior to the revaluation of these currencies, Trust Unlimited has put a turnkey program in place to assist you. It's a two-phased program. Phase 1 is pre-RV. Phase 2 is post-RV. Pre-RV involves the establishment of a pre-RV package of asset protection trusts with the assignment of your dinar and other currencies on paper to that trust package. Phase 2 is post-RV, involves all of the products, services, and professional referrals that will be made available to you after the revaluation of the dinar and these other currencies. So let's start with Phase 1, which is the establishment, again, of that package of asset protection trusts with the assignment of your currencies on paper to that trust package. Very simply, a trust is a legal instrument one can establish to hold, to manage, and to protect assets. An irrevocable trust package is the best possible asset protection that one can establish domestically. There are other entities that people have been utilizing, and they do provide some level of asset protection, but they are inferior to the trust package that we offer. For example, you could establish an LLC or a sub-S corporation. As the LLC implies, it is a limited liability company. Now, these are business structures which tend to separate business property from personal property. But again, they only provide limited liability protection. They do not provide privacy of your assets. And courts have ruled that if an LLC or a sub-S corporation is owned in the majority, in other words, 51% of its stock is owned either by one individual or a closely held family or group, then that LLC or sub-S corp can be pierced for civil litigation. So that's not going to be an appropriate vehicle. There are single individual irrevocable trust products out there, but they have a vulnerability too. If you have all of your assets within one trust and one of those assets gets involved in civil litigation, because those other assets are also owned by that entity involved in civil litigation, that puts all of those assets in jeopardy in a civil litigation situation. The solution to that problem is to create a package of trusts, and I will explain in more detail why you can substantially protect all of your assets by segregating them in separate sub-trusts. You're going to need to establish this package of trusts, and you're going to need to establish it prior to the revaluation of these currencies for a number of reasons. First, by establishing this trust package, and again, I have to make this clear, you retain possession of the currencies. You merely assign them on paper to the trust package. By doing so, you will preserve your privacy and your anonymity, because assets held within this trust package are sealed, meaning that the general public will have no knowledge of your net worth or your actual holdings. The second benefit of establishing this pre-RV trust package is it will allow you to successfully avoid personal IRS scrutiny. That's because by establishing this trust package and assigning your currencies to this trust package, you will have transferred the taxable event of the revaluation from yourself personally to the trust package. If you're holding these currencies in direct title when they revalue, the IRS computers will most likely spit out an audit. And with the potential magnitude of this revaluation relative to your prior year's earnings, the IRS is probably going to require a full-blown 6-year audit. Such an audit would be time-consuming, it would be frustrating, and frankly, it would probably cost you more than the cost of our asset protection trust. On the other hand, if your trust is in place and your currencies are assigned to that trust, you've transferred the taxable event from yourself personally to the trust. Now, this is important for two reasons. First, there's only a 10% chance of an audit if the taxable event of this revaluation occurs within our trust. And second, and most importantly, even if the IRS determines to audit the trust, they can't do a 6-year audit. Why? Because the only taxable event within the trust will be the revaluation itself. The third reason you'd want to establish this trust package is because we have created an exclusive gift sub-trust which will allow you to gift currencies to family and friends. Now, if you're gifting to individuals that you have no problem giving them the currency to exchange for themselves, or giving them the U.S. dollars after you have conducted the exchange, that can be accomplished outside of a trust with a standard gift letter. But if you are hesitant for any reason to give these individuals the U.S. dollar lump sum, you can gift to them through this exclusively designed gift subtrust. Because you're gifting through this subtrust, their money will be protected along with yours. The language of this subtrust will allow you to gift up to a certain amount of a currency or currencies, meaning you can gift the exact dollar amount that you had in mind irrespective of the exchange rate. But because you're gifting through this subtrust, you will be able to manage, to invest, and distribute the money to these individuals as you deem appropriate. The fourth reason you'd want to establish this trust package is because it's been structured in such a way as to allow your estate to bypass the cost and delay of probate and the federal estate tax. I'll give you two quick scenarios. Scenario number one, you purchase 5 million dinar for $5,000. The day after that, those currencies revalue for $25 million. The day after that, you pass away, leaving your heirs an estate of $25 million. Now that estate must go through probate, a process that ordinarily can take anywhere from 6 to 18 months. But probate is a public disclosure process, meaning that the general public will be aware of the size of your estate, who your heirs are, and how much they each stand to inherit. So if anyone feels they have a legitimate claim against you, your estate, or your heirs, they could simply file that claim with a probate court. And that could tie the estate up for years, and in some cases even decades. And during that period of time, your heirs will have either limited access or no access at all to their respective inheritance until the probate process is completed. Then there's something called the federal estate tax, the tax that the federal government will assess in order for that estate to be transferred to heirs. Under current law, approximately $10 million of that $25 million estate would bypass any federal estate tax. but the balance could be taxed as much as 55%. Scenario number 2, you purchase 5 million dinar for $5,000. The day after that, you assign those currencies on paper to our asset protection trust package. The day after that, those currencies revalue for $25 million. The day after that, you pass away, leaving your heirs that same estate of $25 million, but this time protected in our asset protection trust package. As a result, there will be no probate. There will be no public disclosure of your estate. Your heirs will have immediate access to their respective inheritance, and the federal estate tax will be zero, saving your heirs as much as 55% of their inheritance. The 5th reason you'd want to establish this trust package is for some very specific asset protection benefits. One pre-RV, one post-RV. Pre-RV, this trust package will allow you to circumvent something called the Uniform Fraudulent Transfer Act. What does that mean? Under our system of civil procedure, you can only be sued for what you own in direct title or the value of property at the time you transfer it out of title to an entity like our trust package. So let's take the previous example from before. You purchase 5 million dinar for $5,000. You assign those currencies on paper to our trust package. They subsequently revalue for $25 million. You begin to live a lifestyle more reflective of your newfound wealth, and a couple of years down the road, someone sees that you're living rather comfortably and decides for whatever reason that they're going to sue you. Now, this prospective plaintiff has a couple of problems. First, he or she better have a very strong case and very deep pockets, because this trust is structured in such a way as to make it extremely expensive and extremely time-consuming to pursue civil litigation. Secondly, and most importantly, pursuant to the Uniform Fraudulent Transfer Act, once a prospective plaintiff learns that the only thing they could ever win by way of a civil award would be the pre-RV value of $5,000, the value of the property at the time you transferred it to our trust, and none of the post-RV value of $25 million, they will drop their lawsuit. Post-RV, there's a benefit I like to refer to as limited liability stop loss. This protects you from future bad acts after you have acquired this wealth. This protection and this asset legal protection strategy is accomplished through something called segregation of assets, and this is how it would work. We'll use the same example. You purchase 5 million dinar for $5,000, transfer the currencies to our trust. They subsequently revalue for $25 million. Now that you have $25 million in trust, you decide to make some purchases. So you purchase a larger primary residence, a vacation home, perhaps a half a dozen rental properties for tax write-off and additional cash flow, a couple of cars, a boat, and let's say an RV. But as you purchase these items, you place each of them in their own separate subtrust to be managed by your master trust, the trust which held your assigned currencies pre-RV and your financial assets like bank accounts and investment accounts post-RV. Now, why is this an important legal strategy? Well, let's say you're driving one of your new cars, you have an accident, the accident is clearly your fault, and tragically someone is seriously injured or even killed. Well, the family of the victim is going to want to sue you. But remember, civil suits are about monetary awards, and you don't legally own anything. So the plaintiffs would be left to sue the owner of the car that you were driving. Well, who owns that car? One of your subtrusts of which you are merely the beneficiary. And what's in that subtrust? Merely that one car and the car insurance policy. In that scenario, the car insurance carrier will negotiate an out-of-court settlement with the victim's family. You will not be involved in those rather unpleasant negotiations. The car insurance carrier will repair or replace your car, making you whole, and all of your other assets are safely protected in the other subtrusts. Now, this is an important legal distinction. Why are those other assets protected in the other sub-trusts? It's because under the law, those separate sub-trusts are separate legal entities or persons, and the plaintiffs would have no standing to pursue a separate legal entity. So this trust package works very much in theory, in principle, the way a barge would work, where all of the valuable cargo is stored in a series of small compartments. Why? In the event that any compartment is ever breached, the only potential loss would be the cargo in that one compartment. The cargo in the other compartments is safe and secure due to the firewalls, and the barge will never sink. Now, these benefits are lost to you if you do not establish your package of asset protection trusts prior to the revaluation of these currencies. Now, there is one other benefit, and it's this. If you are, in fact, the holder of one of our pre-RV asset protection trust packages, then you will be eligible to participate in Phase 2, post-RV, all of the products, services, and professional referrals that will be made available to you, and that will be very important in helping you create a long-term program to preserve and grow your wealth, not only for yourself, but for your children and grandchildren. I'll just make mention of one such benefit here this afternoon. Trusts Unlimited will be sponsoring a post-RV seminar to be held in Disney World, Florida, approximately 30 days after the revaluation of the Iraqi dinar. Present at that seminar will, of course, be the staff of Trusts Unlimited to assist you with the management and funding of your trust packages post-RV. Many of our clients have expressed desires to establish scholarship funds, foundational trusts, special needs trusts, charitable remainder trusts, and even the more complicated 501c3 nonprofit and offshore trusts. And the proper way to fund those entities would be the direct transfer of funds from your asset protection trust to these newly formed entities. We'll also have our tax specialists at this seminar. We will have our offshore specialists there as well. They will show you that by establishing offshore title of certain assets, you can substantially reduce and in some cases defer taxes on the reinvestment of the net proceeds from the revaluation itself. We will also have our independent fee-based wealth managers there as well. You're going to want to reposition assets after the revaluation for a number of reasons. First, we know statistically that 95% of all windfalls, however large and from whatever source, are lost within 3 to 5 years due to inexperience, mismanagement, and fraud. We also know that under the new G20 bank bail-in provisions, the failure of banks will no longer be made whole through the general taxing authority of the respective governments, but first and foremost by the confiscation of funds at those banks. So you're going to want to get money out of banks and at work in other markets for a number of reasons. Lastly, the general global shift from fiat-based to Basel III compliant commodity-backed currencies in and of itself is going to create extremely volatile financial markets, and you're going to want to transition a substantial amount of your net worth to tangible assets as well. Now, our trust package is initially a package of 10 trusts consisting of one master trust that will hold your assigned currencies pre-RV and your financial assets like bank accounts and investment accounts post-RV, one optional gift subtrust which can be utilized at any time as a standard subtrust, and 8 additional standard subtrusts to hold physical assets like homes, cars, boats, etc. Now, this was the simplification of a rather sophisticated trust package that we've utilized for our more affluent clients, a package that had an initial cost of anywhere from $6,000 to $10,000. But a few years back when we decided to work with denarians, we understood that that price tag would be unaffordable for many. So by restructuring that trust package, we've been able to reduce the cost to $3,000. Now, there are several ways you can pay for that. If you pay us up front, we'll discount the price further to $2,500, saving you an additional $500. If that's not possible, we've even established a deferred payment arrangement. You'd make an initial payment of $525, which sum is our out-of-pocket cost just to produce and deliver your trust. The balance of the $3,000 would then be paid in $100 monthly installments. We will charge no interest. The only proviso is once the revaluation of the Iraqi dinar occurs, any unpaid balance would need to be paid within 30 days. With this approach, anyone that has currencies and understands the need for establishing their trust prior to the revaluation should be in a position to afford to do so. One other suggestion, we do accept credit cards. Pay us up front with a credit card. Not only will you get the $500 discount, but the minimum payment on your card would be substantially less than the $100 a month you'd be paying us under our deferred payment arrangement. But we will work with you in whatever method works best for you. Our objective is to help you get your affairs in order and your trust in place prior to the revaluation of these currencies for all of the reasons that I've stated here. Now, again, I'd like to thank you for taking the time to listen to this call. We're going to the Q&A in just a minute, but before we do, and again for the benefit of our newer callers, I'd like to tell you just a little bit about Trusts Unlimited and why you may want to seriously consider allowing us to assist you. Our trust package was authored by our attorney, Robert Bly. He's been a practicing attorney for over 40 years, specializing in the areas of estate planning, asset protection, and offshore planning. I myself hold degrees in political science, macroeconomics, and finance. I've worked in these areas for over 38 years, and I, along with my clients, were personally involved in the reinstatement of the Kuwaiti dinar in the early 90s. So between the two of us, Robert Bly and I have over 78 years' experience working precisely in this very narrow area, and I frankly know of no firm that can make that claim. Now, Bob and I have been working together for a decade in the areas of estate planning, asset protection, and offshore planning, and it has been disheartening from time to time to see people walk away from estate planning and trust creation because of the mistaken belief that by doing so they have somehow lost control of their assets and their affairs. In point of fact, it's just the reverse. Under our system of civil litigation, it's when you hold assets in direct title that you can lose control of them. And invariably, it's at precisely those times in life that you need and want control. If you've lived for any length of time, you've either experienced in your own life or through friends and family things like unexpected divorce, permanent incapacitation, the onset of dementia, premature death and prolonged and complicated probate processes. Then there are investment losses, business losses, and even bankruptcies. The number 2 loss of wealth now in the aggregate, courtesy of the information age, is identity theft. But the number 1 loss of personal wealth remains confiscation through civil litigation. Anything you own in direct title can be taken from you. And wealthy people, statistically, 1 in 4 will suffer civil litigation precisely because they have wealth that a prospective plaintiff wants to confiscate. So the only way that you can manage, protect, and control everything at all times and in all circumstances is through the creation of a package of irrevocable trusts, and particularly if you have an asset like these currencies that you're anticipating a substantial increase in value. And we at Trusts Unlimited will do everything we can to help you accomplish your personal and financial objectives both pre and post-RV as we understand it. Again, thanks for listening to the call. I'm going to the Q&A in just a moment. If the things I've discussed here are of interest to you, I suggest you contact us and get our initial package, so have a pen and paper ready. You're under absolutely no obligation at all for getting our initial informational package, even though it includes everything you need if you should decide to proceed and establish a trust. You can review the package. It's got a lot of information. You can contact us either by phone or email if you have questions. We'll be happy to answer whatever questions you may have, and there will be no consultation fee. Again, we're doing everything we can to help you accomplish your financial objectives as we understand them. So I'm going to go ahead and open the Q&A now. 2 quick rules on the Q&A. We do not take service calls on the Q&A. This Q&A is reserved for prospective clients that have questions about Trusts Unlimited and our services. And second, for obvious reasons, your name and number must be on the screen in order to participate in the Q&A. And while I'm waiting for any potential questions, I'd like to give our newer callers our contact information. You can go to our website, which is trusts with an S, unlimitedllc.com. You can go to our email, which is trusts with an S, unlimitedllc@gmail.com. Our phone service is 307-274-4122. If you'd like to listen to a recent conference call playback, or if you'd be kind enough to refer us to someone that might be interested in our services, you can either go to YouTube and then go to Trusts Unlimited, or you can go to IQD calls and go to Trusts Unlimited, or you can simply dial the same number that you dialed for this call this afternoon, with the exception of the last digit. Rather than dialing a 4, you'll dial a 3, and then use the same access code, which is 739-394#. If you'd like to be included on our email list, you can go to our website, go to the bottom, enter your name and email address where indicated. You should be on our email list within 24 hours. Bear in mind that we only send emails out very periodically, pre-RV, but post-RV emails will certainly be going out on a weekly basis and perhaps even on a daily basis. So let's go to a Q&A. We have a caller here. This is area code 312. That's 312. Sounds like Les. Go ahead.
Yes, indeed. Hi, Jim. Good afternoon. Thanks for having the call. Missed you last week. And question.
Sure.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Me first. All right, I'll go first. All right. So I saw an article which read that Iran or Iraq is, what's that word called when you're not, they're exempt from any of the sanctions against Iran.
Yeah, the United States placed a temporary exemption on the sanctions with Iraq because Iraq's electric grid's down and they need natural gas from Iran in order to function. So it was a concession that was made, but time is running out on that. And if Iran continues to try to interfere in the United States' interests in the Middle East and the independence of Iraq separate and apart from Iran, then that exemption is going to fall away. The thinking now, and as a matter of fact, Pompeo, in his discussions with the Iraqi officials, one of the things that he made clear is the best way for Iraq to proceed is to revalue their currency and enter into international contracts with other countries that can assist them. So one of the reasons Iran is upset is because they're well aware of the fact that the international community is trying to wean Iraq away from any dependence or negotiations with Iran.
Okay. All right. As I figured,
the sanctions against Iran are really working. The United States has basically said three things. They've said to Iraq, you're going to need to walk away from Iran. You're going to have to make a choice. They said to some of the European nations and other nations, if you circumvent our sanctions, you're not going to be doing business with us. And part of the negotiations that are going on with China right now, because China is the biggest purchaser of Iranian oil, is that they need to back off and honor the sanctions, or the tariffs that the United States has placed on Chinese goods is going to continue. So there's a lot going on, but hopefully Iraq is going to be able to circumvent all that and reinstitute their currency despite all of this chaos.
Yeah, and I figured they knew, and everyone else knew. I think they knew that Iran was supplying Iraq, and Iraq needed it, and it wasn't that they were being hard-headed or stone-headed about letting them go. They need Iran's assistance right now, which is nothing new.
I'm going to say something I probably shouldn't say, but I'm going to go ahead and say it. As I mentioned in the call, I was on a rather long call with my godson, who is in Iraq right now. And he was telling me that one of the things that the Iranian militia are trying to do, he said they're basically like the street thugs, and they're trying to intimidate some of the more sympathetic Shia elected officials to side with Iran. They're trying to gum up the works because they know the reinstitution of the currency is going to liberate Iraq from Iran. But he told me that he refers to himself as a locked and loaded Uber driver. He drives military and political officials around, and he says what some of these militias like to do is when he's driving down the street, they like to ride next to him in tandem, just to be a pain. And he kiddingly said one time that he looked over at the guy, dropped his sunglasses down to the end of his nose so they could see his eyes, and he leered at him, and he held up an automatic weapon, and the guy backed off. So he said, the Iranians, they're furious because the sanctions have really, really crippled their economy. They know they can't confront us head on, so they're just trying to be a fly in the ointment. They also know that there is now a very strong alliance, not only with the United States and Saudi Arabia, but the Saudis have even agreed to ally themselves with Israel. So that coalition right there absolutely negates Iran and any of the support that they could ever hope to get either from Russia or China. So all of this is going to resolve itself. It's just going to take time. I sincerely hope that the Iranians get the message, but unfortunately, brute naked force is the only thing that they seem to understand. We hope it doesn't come to that, but the purpose of all of the troops there is to deter any more misbehavior and miscalculations on their part.
Okay. Now, was there actually any missiles or any rockets or anything shot at an embassy?
Yes,
or anything
there was something. Yes, there was something fired. He talked about that. He said they're very inaccurate. He said what they do is they put them on a timer, they set it off, and then they run away. So they don't even know if it goes off or where it goes. It's sort of like the Scuds that the Palestinians were lobbing over at Israel. They don't know where they're going to land. The difference is they throw a Scud up, and they throw a bunch of them up, hoping they'll hit something. But when the Israelis respond, I mean, they can knock your eye out. They can pinpoint whatever they want. So they can't win. They just can't win, and it's just going to take time for them to understand that it's over. It's over.
Okay. All right. Any word on the Lord Denams being out or being released?
Nope. My understanding is they still remain in the 8 regional banks, and they need the deletion of the zeros before they unload those.
Okay. And lastly, I saw an article that mentioned something about Iraq revaluing their currency, and it had something to do with, and it also said something regarding them changing the prices of things in the country. Have you heard anything about that?
Well, when you change the value of a currency, which is used in the exchange of goods and services, it'll obviously have some effect on the cost of goods and services. So that's part of the complication, and that's why it's a shame they didn't get this done in January. Now, the Iranians stepped up their threats and threatening to issue counterfeit currency and flood the market and do all of these things precisely because they knew that the reinstitution of the dinar in January would basically mean that Iraq would be free from its dependence on Iran. So, I don't think they'd get away with that in January because, I don't know how long the mullahs can stand. Their economy is totally crippled. I've discussed this before. They're 12th Imamers. They're lunatics. They do just the opposite of what they need to do. They're apocalyptic jihadists, and that's who they are. And so the only way to deal with them is say, you kill one of ours, we'll kill 1,000 of yours. I mean, how you want to play it,
All right. Well, that's all I got. Thanks for taking my call.
Okay.
Take care. Say hi to the professor.
I will. Take care. Bye-bye.
All right. You too. Bye-bye.
Our next caller is area code 405. That's 405. Go ahead.
Hi, Jim. This is Doug in Oklahoma.
Yes, sir.
The sanctions against Iran and the waivers for the 9 industrial countries that were allowed to continue purchasing oil That all came to an end on May 2nd, if that's correct. Is that right?
That's my understanding as well. The only country that got a little stay of execution was Iraq, in my understanding.
Okay, right. Turkey, as a member of NATO, was basically rattling the sabers about, you can't tell us what to do because the pipeline is direct through Kurdistan into Turkey. But on the side, I have read that they actually are going to comply, and that the Saudi Arabia and the UAE have pledged to make up the difference with any shortfall, not only to them, but to South Korea and Japan and some of the other nations. The only other nation that is really dependent on Iranian oil is China, and I don't think we're going to be able to get them to comply with the sanctions. So with that,
okay. First of all, the United States can always shut down that pipeline to Turkey if they want to play hardball. Turkey is the weak link in NATO and always has been. They've used their geopolitical their position next to Russia as a wedge. That's why they've been able to abuse Greece and the Greek islands and attack Cyprus in '74 and kick the Greeks out. It's because they took advantage of that situation. But Russia, since the fall of Russia, they've lost that leverage. Where China's concerned is one of the ways we can work with China, and it's probably one of the moving parts in the negotiation, is we can always sell China some of our oil credits from Iraq, and China will pay us in gold, which is what we need to back our new currency as well. So there's a lot of things we can do to circumvent the individuals that are trying to circumvent the sanctions. And that's why Iran is so upset right now, because they're running out of options here. They're either going to have to grow up and be a modern nation state, or they're going to have to continue to live in this barbaric medieval fashion. So we'll just have to see how that plays out.
Well, it all comes down to money as far as how they support their operations in Syria and Yemen. And so with the oil revenue being the chief source of revenue for Iran, and with the interference that they have with the Republican Guard in Iraq, if they can't support it financially, then they're going to have to either withdraw or start some type of regional conflict. So with Trump, basically, like we heard in February, we were pretty well set to go, but the NSA came in and basically put a hold on the reinstitution. If the pressure that can be applied monetarily through the lack of oil sales can bring them to a point of reason, perhaps we can then get to our reinstitution. But it all depends on how fast they can shut off the oil tap. And I just don't know if you have any...
Well, remember,
pardon me?
The reason that they were threatening to kill and kidnap American military and other officials in Iraq is a show of the desperation. Their thinking after 8 years of Obama was we would back off. Trump's response was to send in a carrier task force and a B-52 bomber squadron and an additional 5,000 troops in Iraq. What they're basically saying to Iran is, no. You smack us, I'm going to smack you twice. You're not going to get away with it. It's over. That's why I said it's over. It's over. They have to behave or suffer the consequences. Now, no one wants a war. And, of course, unfortunately, Iran's intention would be to fight that war in Iraq. So the way you would circumvent that would be a massive coordinated attack on Iran. If Iran believes that the United States would do that if necessary, that would force them to back off. And that's what I think the United States and the coalition forces, Saudi Arabia and Israel, are basically trying to say. What you've been doing for the last 40 years is going to stop. It's going to stop. And that's where we are. But unfortunately, the reemergence of Iraq and the reinstitution of their currency is being temporarily held hostage to the situation.
I agree, and the fact that we have, well, not we, but Iraq has so many Shia sympathizers that we have that other aspect of complication in that, I would imagine that Iran gets some of their signals from people inside the Iraqi government about what they're going to be able to do and what they can't do, and unfortunately, I think it still favors some of the aspects that Iran is carrying out, like having soldiers in.
Iran is taking advantage of the fact of two things. Number one, the majority of Iraqis are Shia, and number two, they are still suffering from the abuse of Saddam Hussein, the Ba'ath Party. They, of course, were Sunnis, and ISIS were Sunnis. So Iran was able to convince the Iraqi officials that they needed the Revolutionary Guard in Iraq to repel the Sunnis. Of course, that, and to some extent that's true, but now that the caliphate's been eviscerated, those forces are not leaving. They have no intention of leaving. So, we needed to step up our presence to let them know, well, no, Iraq is going to stay on its glide path to independence. As a free sovereign nation, they're going to reinstitute their currency. They're going to deal internationally with whomever they wish. And as long as you keep rattling sabers and having your proxies, terrorists throughout the Middle East and other places, we're not going to permit it. So we can go round and round about this. Basically, Iran needs to go back into their box in order for this to proceed. And I really think that that's what's happening right now. Despite the things that Iran is saying, they're not stupid people. Crazy and stupid aren't the same thing. They're crazy, but they're not stupid. So they know that they can't possibly win, certainly a conventional engagement. So it's like I say, it's over. It's over.
Well, it all depends just on how fast the oil tap can be shut off. And if the 9 nations that were given waivers, if they will abide by the purchase of oil from alternative sources, then it would shut down pretty quickly. It's just on whether or not they'll comply with those. I mean, here we are.
The United States can do two things. Number one, now they're a net exporter of oil, so they can buy the oil from us. But even if they don't buy the oil from us, if we continue to produce oil at this level, it will force the global price of a barrel to drop, which will hurt Iran and Russia because the main sources, and even Iraq to some extent, but primarily Iran and Russia, because that's the primary source of revenue. And, of course, if a barrel of oil drops from $65 to $38, it just crushes them. So, but listen, we could go on and on. Basically, where we are is that the delay in the reinstitution of the currency is directly related to the misbehavior of Iraq's neighbor, Iran, and hopefully the United States has put Iran on notice that this cannot continue.
Thank you, Jim. Appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Bye-bye. Well, that's our last caller for this afternoon. Well, every once in a while we do get into these geopolitical discussions because they do have a bearing on what's going on in Iraq. Our next call is scheduled for next Wednesday. Certainly, if something of a dramatic nature were to happen between now and then, we'll try to get out an emergency email and schedule an emergency call. Failing that, we will be back next Wednesday, noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. Have a great week, everyone.